Hi YSP staff, this is Ria and this is the first instructional video for 3rd graders in the spring. So the week 1 lesson is the frog life cycle, and it's a great lesson to start out on for the semester. It's pretty straightforward to teach and for the students to understand. Okay, so let's hop into the lesson. So the lesson has the students exploring different stages of the frog life cycle and then creating their own little cute version to take home, as you can see in the right hand side picture. So for prep, in addition to the normal prep that you would do to teach the lesson, this week you are going to have to do some prep for the craft. And it depends on how much you feel that your class will need beforehand. But for my classes, I cut out the arms and the legs of the frog as well as the body. And this leaves the students in charge of cutting out the white slips that go on the body with each step, and then the head, and then also they have to put everything together in the end. So in my classes, the students share scissors and glue with their table, so I knew it would take quite a while, which is why I had done that. But it really just depends on how fast your class can get things done, with how much you want to prep beforehand. Okay, so for the vocab for this lesson, I introduced what a life cycle was, and I also introduced what an organism is. And I think this is helpful for later on because it comes up a lot in the next couple of lessons. And I have my students write notes in the notes section on the left-hand side of their journals. That way, like, we can reference it later on in later weeks if we need to come back to review something, and I think it's super helpful for them. Okay, so moving on to the intro. I introduced like different types of life cycles. So we talked about the butterfly life cycle, which they all seem to be super familiar with. So you can use that as an example. We also tried to relate it to them by talking about like the human life cycle. So how they didn't look the same as they did 3 years ago, like how they grew from a baby to a 3rd grader, stuff like that. So okay, next, the question for this week that I used was, what are the correct steps of the frog life cycle? So I had them write that down in their journals. And then for the prediction, what I did this week was I wrote the 6 steps down from the frog life cycle on the board and like kind of scrambled it up. And I had them predict the order um, of the frog life cycle. And yeah, so after that, we watched this video. This is a really great video. You can find it in the instruction sheet in the drive. We watched the video and I had the students write down one thing that they learned in the observation section. And yeah, and then our conclusion that we made was the correct order of the steps, and we came up with that as a class, and they wrote that down in the conclusion spot. And for the activity, um, what we had them do was I explained the craft, and one thing that I definitely recommend is having an example of like a completed one. It was super helpful for students to visualize how to put it together instead of you having to explain it over and over again, so they could just come up and look at the example. Um, and also, it takes different students will take different amounts of time. So what I had them do is, if they were done, they got to color it, and that keeps students busy if they finish early. And then at the end, I just left some time for cleanup, and they were super excited with their new project that they could take home. So yeah, that was the frog life cycle in week 1.